All right. This is episode 100, episode cake of the Unnecessary Nonsense podcast. Once upon a time, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it was the podcast of two unqualified idiots rambling on sports topics they likely know nothing about for an indeterminate timeline in a hastily thrown together format. Today, that is mostly still true. Still two idiots, still topics, but not always sports. Sometimes sports. Maybe I make fun of Mike Trout. Maybe make fun of Tom Brady. It's something else. We'll figure it out. We'll workshop it. 100 episodes in, we'll figure it out. We're still warming up. I will introduce ourselves, and we'll talk a little bit about where, before we go to the future, we must acknowledge where we've been. But before that, gratuitous cartoon image of our face. The egos must be appeased. I am Carlos. That's Dave.
The appeasing of the egos is the key point, Carlos.
Well, this is literally what I live my life by, Dave. You know this by this point. Basically, if I was going to encapsulate my approach to life, and if I was to help you all in exactly what you need to do, this is simple. I don't actually need it, but nonetheless, I still want you to do it. And if I was going to encapsulate a nice, simple, short phrase, it's simply this: praise me. And then as long as you do that, then we're probably good. So anyway, we're celebrating our 100th episode. A couple of different. So number one, great milestone. It's 99 and a half more episodes than I thought. So that's already a step in the right direction. But in addition, we met our goal. You know, the cake is not a lie. It is in fact episode cake. So respect to that, and kudos to the parental units on grabbing this little board. I will not be updating this every episode because that takes too much hashtag effort. But nonetheless, I do appreciate it for a special episode. And while we chat about it, the cake is not a lie. I do have my piece of cake. Dave has had his ice cream cake as well.
Yes, I decided to go with ice cream cake because why have only one kind of cake when you can have multiple kinds of cake, Carlos? With episode cake, you deserve more than one kind of cake.
Yes, and out of respect for episode cake, I have an image of the cake that this is a piece of with the 100 candles, which again, graciously offered by the family who will, in payment, eat the rest of the cake.
Nice. Now, question though, did you light the candles at any point?
No, really, this was just for the photo op. This is just for the shameless photo op because I said, like, realistically, my mom asked, she was like, well, do you want me to light? I was like, do you really want to light these candles? She goes, well, I can use them for later. Because you think you got a 1 and you got a 0, so you can use it for at least a couple of different birthday variations.
It's true.
So you got some options there, and she can just hang on to it for later. But the cake is that is a tuxedo cake. It's actually quite good. We've had that one before. The last couple of birthdays have been that kind of tuxedo cake. Nice. So we did use a Alcazar family friendly cake for episode 100 because I assure you, the rest of the family, by the time I get back and look at it again, that cake may no longer be there. That may be the last time you see it intact.
Probably.
Not allegedly.
Knowing your dad and his love of cake, it's probably already half gone.
Well, you should have seen the joy on his face when, as commissioner of Cake Day, I gave him a very simple task. I go, you must procure a cake and bring it to me.
Was that one of those? And he was just like, and you're like, here you go. And you're like, but you didn't even leave. He was like, I've been waiting for this moment all of my life.
That's very true. Well, like I said, as we established already in previous episodes, I am the OG Carlos. And as future Carlos in training, Carlos Sr., as a secondary level Carlos, he's still working on it. We're workshopping it. Eventually, as an apprentice, someday he will elevate to proper Carlos status.
This is fair.
But the cake was a necessity prerequisite in order to make this work. Anyway, so we'll get to our general ADC momentarily. But before we do, let us quickly, 100 episodes. For anybody who hasn't seen an episode before, either on YouTube or on Spotify, Instagram, haven't heard it or seen it on YouTube or whatever the case is, how did these two morons get to 100 episodes? Well, we cheated and we actually skipped to episode 100. No, we didn't do that. But
actually, I think haven't we done more than 100 episodes, but some of them just never made it to air?
Well, there were a couple of those, but the extras came from the actual podcast extras. They were ones that sometimes I was recording when something happened live, and then a reaction video, but I never counted those as episodes proper. They were always their own unnecessary nonsense podcast extras.
Back in the days of the AAF when you did weekly updates on the now defunct football league.
Listen, single tier. I will always miss the F. Dead before it's time. Dead before it's time. The good old AF. Listen.
It's okay though. Soon you can moor in the XFL again. And probably exactly. And probably the USFL as well. And who knows, maybe the CFL. But if they would just go with our Sarah McLachlan telethon idea, they'd be fine.
Well, in fairness, the CFL was never a thing. But the important thing is that the XFL, yes, that's probably true. I did look into it a little bit more, and then I want to get into the backstory of the podcast a little bit momentarily. But the thing is, I did look into it more, and apparently the guy who's in charge of it is the guy who does the Spring League, which has been running for a couple of years doing its own kind of thing. So maybe, I'm not going to assume yet, but if they make it an actual feeder system thing, like a developmental league that the NFL actually sort of endorses, then they might have a shot at sticking it out. The TV thing is helpful. So like having FS1 as a partner is like a big thing. And if the NFL actually helps them in some way, I could see it maybe working a little bit, possibly. So I'm not going to throw it out completely, but I need to see more. So since last episode, I did find out that, and I was like, okay, that's, at least I know the Spring League. I haven't watched any of it, but at least I've heard of it. I know what that is, and that helps. And so that maybe makes sense why they were able to get FS1 as a partner. So that kind of makes sense. And the other thing that kind of makes sense is I wonder if they actually, if they would actually go in and turn them into an officially sanctioned feeder league. Because immediately that gives you credibility. If you do that and make that a real thing, suddenly there's a landing spot for college football players who may be out of eligibility, or college football players who want to go pro early and maybe need the money. Like,
or maybe they suffered an injury. Like, think about somebody like Dwayne Johnson, right? The Rock, where he basically he won the championship with the University of Miami in his first year, but he also got injured that year, so he didn't actually play in the championship game. But that injury sort of derailed his ascent, if you will, where he ended up going to the CFL, and then obviously that didn't work out, and obviously his life worked out pretty well from not being a football player.
Never heard of the guy. Has he done anything?
Yeah, but somebody like that who maybe was a rising star, then it didn't quite work out for whatever reason, now has another opportunity sanctioned to say, hey, let's do it. Now the question is it going to work as a sort of like a AAA? Right?
That's basically what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking would make the most. If you want to live and you want to sustain, you're not going to compete with the NFL on even footing.
At this stage of the game, it's a dumb idea.
No, yeah. But as a feeder system that is like a AAA, that is professional, you pay the guys, I could see that being viable.
Unless the only way I think it would work is you're like, I want to compete with them, is if you had somebody like Jeff Bezos take it over, or Elon Musk. And it's like, here is all the money I have. Go do your thing. Sure. I will pay you whatever you want.
Sure, but is that even worth it when NFL stadiums cost billions of dollars to build?
No.
Like the startup costs are so huge.
That's
why?
true too, yeah.
Like why?
Fair enough. I don't think it's actually going to happen.
No, but I'm saying, like, if the NFL though co-signs as a developmental league directly feeding to the NFL, they're like, okay, well, you've got now they might even lend you the stadiums. At that point, they're working with you, because if you're working cooperatively, well, now you have venues. Now you have access to facilities.
And you have a reason to exist and continue to exist.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden, the rest of the pieces fall into place immediately. That's what really happened with the AF. Tom Dundon ran out of patience. He wanted to be a developmental league now. And they were like, build it up. Build the business model. Let's proof of concept. We need to finish the season. Let's get to the end here. And he was like, no, too late. I don't like it anymore. Pull the plug.
Which is too bad, because the football was actually pretty decent.
But that's the thing, is that the owner has to be patient. If the possibility is actually there, again, they got FS1 to sign up on this. They have equity stake in that league. So they must think something of it. Like, out of nowhere, USFL, after 30 years, you suddenly show up. Why? I don't know. So you get Doug Flutie doing some promos for you.
Because reasons, Carlos.
Exactly. So let me quickly, and we'll come back to some of this stuff. We'll talk more about it as we learn more and as we get a little further along on that. But quickly, I did want to touch on a little bit of the past. So the first episode was back in the heady days of January 2019, when Dave's garbage football team lost the NFC Championship. And I posited that Tom Brady's Kylo Ren, an opinion which hasn't changed really.
That was probably the hottest take this podcast has ever had.
And the most correct. Like, 2 years on, I stand by it, goddammit. I stand by it so hard.
If you don't know who Kylo Ren is, learn, and then you will understand that Tom Brady is the Kylo Ren of the NFL football.
Yep, and then just nod in agreement with Carlos. That's really all you got to do. It's perfect. It's wonderful. But, so over 2 years to get to these 100 episodes, and here we are. Now, originally it was, per the spiel, that shall never be uttered again, except in syndication. You can go watch our archive of episodes. There are 99 more of them. And you can expect the type of high quality content that you have heard in the last several minutes. But the thing is, honestly, it gets better. I promise. It really does get better. It's really shitty at the beginning. It gets better eventually. But the thing is, but the takes do get hotter. And the Tom Brady slander is real. But the thing is that originally it was supposed to be like a sports podcast thing, but let's be realistic. The big development on it is that as time went on, it's like, I like the concept. But the reality was, it's like, no, I just like sitting here and having some fun, going through some different topics. And eventually it was like, look, let me just put in this topic. Let me put in this topic. And there is lots of room. It's not like there aren't sports podcasts out there. I still like talking about sports at different times, but it's one of those things. You got to go one of two ways. You got to go super niche. You can't go all over the map and do every sport. Nobody really does a good job doing that, including us. We really didn't. But if you're going to even try, then you have to go to a level of depth. It can't just be like, yeah, I watched the games and I saw a couple of things. Like, no, you got to do some digging. Advanced sabermetrics. Do something to go a level below what the average fan can see in a game. You can still do that if you want to, but it's like, no, you gotta go a level deeper, or focus in on something very specific. One league, one team, and then really go deep on that. That's usually what happens with a lot of the sports podcasts, is that you go either super niche, or if you're going to do broad, bring in, here's an expert on this team, or here's an expert on the salary cap, or this, that, and the other thing. You can do that. Honestly, I just like talking about random shit and making fun of Tom Brady and Mike Trout and whoever else annoys me at that time, or randomly explain wrestling things that will be inexplicable, like we will do later on.
This is true. But does this mean, Carlos, based on your explanation you just gave there, will there eventually be a Carlos-led Aussie Rules football podcast?
Dave, I have dreams. And amongst those dreams, well, there's really a lot of them, but an Aussie Rules football podcast that I lead, all I have to do is find the right Australian co-host that really likes weird time zones. And I got this.
It's true. I feel you would do a very good job of that with your Australian co-host, of course.
No, I need an Australian co-host. I need someone who can actually watch these games at the proper time zone. It's like a necessity. I love it. I enjoy it for what it is, but I need someone who can watch it at the time the thing actually happened. That's super important to this city. I was like, I am sleep deprived, but I do not in fact live in all time zones, contrary to popular rumor.
That's unfortunate.
It is. But anyway, so I thought I would go, over 2 years, 100 episodes plus the extras, plus a bunch of other random things, many, many references, a lot of slander, and here we are in episode 100, where we in fact produced cake, showed you cake, referenced cake, and I am eating cake.
Yes. And I already ate my cake.
Well, ice cream cake doesn't last as long.
Yeah, so exactly. Ice cream cake melts. It was DQ ice cream cake, and I love it, and it was fantastic.
Beautiful. So normally what we'll do is we'll have a little chat at the beginning about what we've done this past week, but I think we're going to have fair number of little things to talk about, and we're going to have some fun with it. So do you mind if I introduce a random topic to start off?
Please.
So in the spirit, I do like paying attention to various types of, investments in markets. Usually I'll talk about the sports cards, and I will do a little bit of that, but today sometimes I like to show Dave an article or a headline or something, and then we talk about it for a little bit, but he doesn't know what I'm going to show him. And that's what we're going to do.
This is true.
That's what we're going to do here. So allow me to share my screen here for a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show it to you, and I need you, Dave, to read the headline, and then we'll proceed from there.
All right. So the headline here says, CryptoPunk NFT sells for $11.8 million at Sotheby's. Can I just facepalm now?
Look at it, Dave. Is it not magnificent? He's got a brown hat. He's got a single pixel for an earring. He's wearing a COVID mask. This is almost $12 million.
It also looks like it's less than 8-bit.
Well,
right? It looks like that's not good enough to make original Nintendo, Carlos.
But in fairness, it probably is 8-bit, but you're blowing it up. You're actually seeing the pixels. Like Mario would look like this if we zoomed in on him enough.
All right, fair enough. This is another example of ridiculousness. Do you need to explain to people again what a non-fungible token is, Carlos? An NFT?
I'm not going to do the full explanation, but the important thing that you need to remember is that it's not a tangible thing. And really, it relies upon the technology of blockchain, which, again, we can go into on a later show. We'll focus in on that if we want to. But the point is, this is basically, in effect, what we're talking about here is $12 million or 11.8 for effectively a piece of digital art. Now, in principle, incredibly ridiculous. For me, as a person who likes to troll life, I enjoy this thoroughly. And anyone I can show this to that has a look of abject horror, that is what I live for. That is the fuel that powers me forward. But it's one of those things. $11.8 million. So that's why I'm trying to say, as we progress forward, I hope by episode 200, we can have our Necessary Nonsense podcast, NFT, which will probably be our logo. And I'm thinking 5 or 6 million.
I'd take that.
I think that's the fairest thing. I think it's the right thing to do. We have much higher resolution imagery. So, like, honestly, in reality, I could probably argue our logo is worth at least double.
That's fair. I think 25. Let's go just 20, even number. 25 million, please.
Exactly. So, the dream can live on. And at that point, then, I can move to my palatial estate and begin my wonderful Aussie Rules football podcast as I build my empire. I see nothing that could possibly go wrong.
This is fair.
But there you go, $11.8 million. And it was sold at Sotheby's as well. It was sold at Sotheby's.
I know, it's legit. It's not that as if this is not a legit thing. It's very legit. I still think it's stupid that anyone paid even close to that much.
But are you at least properly horrified? Did I at least get some level of horror?
Personally, I think, in my opinion, anybody who pays any kind of money for an NFT rightfully horrifies me, in my opinion.
Wow, then we got 11.8 million reasons why this works.
Exactly.
Love it. Beautiful. So I thought I would start with a little random article to get us underway. It was a beautiful thing. I saw it the other day and I just started cackling. It was wonderful. I do enjoy my cryptocurrency. I don't have any problem with Bitcoin and Litecoin and various other ones. I would never recommend it to anybody. I won't give hashtag investment advice on that. But when I saw that, I was like, no, I must share it with people. The people must know.
It's true. They do need to know.
It's important.
And be rightfully horrified. I hope so. I hope anyone who's listening to this or watching this right now, since we are live, is thinking, dude, what the fuck?
No, they're thinking I would have paid at least 12. That's what they're thinking, Dave.
Sure they are.
I pretty much guarantee.
Honestly, but here's the thing. If you have $11.8 million that you can just drop on something, there are lots of things. Carlos, how many Rolexes could you get for that, man? There are so many better things in life that you could spend your money on.
Or you could buy a CryptoPunk.
Yeah, or you could, take half of it and donate to charity and still have a lot of money.
But starving children don't give me CryptoPunks, Dave.
This is true. They don't give anyone CryptoPunk.
You can quote me on that. Starving children in third world do not give me CryptoPunks, Dave. They do not.
Nope.
What are you going to do? Anyway, so on that note, let us proceed. What would you like to? Where would you like to begin? You actually have a couple of things there.
So why don't we talk about the Super League, Carlos? Because I know how much you love the Super League, and I want to tell you the latest phase of the ridiculousness that is the Super League.
I love it. A little bit of Super League salt is always welcome in my book. So for that, we will give Rolling Neymar a chance to come back on the podcast. And then after we discuss Super League, as I, Lord Salt, as I will be remonikered shortly, rejoin the podcast, then I'll bring in a little bit of shameless sports cardsdom into it because, we're going to go back and forth. We're going to have a little fun with it. So, here we go. Are you ready for Rolling Neymar?
Let's do it.
For anyone doing it live, you get the OG music. For those of you on YouTube, you don't.
All right. So here I go, Carlos. So as people hopefully will know, hashtag save the Super League, first of all. Second of all, this was originally a 12-team league that is now defunct, except for the 3 holdout clubs, which are Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Juventus. Here's the best part about this, all right? So first of all, basically every club that was supposed to be part of this has agreed to pay some kind of fine or have some kind of punishment. There was threats of, docking them points, so they may start the season with minus points in the league and then have to kind of catch up. Nobody wanted that. None of the teams wanted that, so they said, okay, we'll pay the money. So, for example, the 6 English Premier League clubs, so Tottenham, Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and some other team that I can no longer remember off the top of my head right now, Chelsea, were fined a combined £22 million, and that had to pay that to the league, and the
God
league
damn it, that's like 2 CryptoPunks. That's trash, Dave. Trash.
the league has said this money will go to the good of the game as an investment in fans and the grassroots, etc. Meaning they're probably just going to pocket the money and be like, yes, we did some great work with this. See, there's a sign over there that says we did that.
And sorry, who's levying the fines? It's
the Premier League.
So Premier League.
Okay, English Premier League. Now, the next part, or it might be the FA, the Football Association, which is in charge of soccer in Britain. One of the two. I don't know. Or there could be one and the same. I don't know. Now, the next part about this is the other holdouts in UEFA. All right.
Please
so that would be, was it Inter Milan, AC Milan, and whoever else. Doesn't matter.
I do, guys. This is important. Remember, this is the football guy on the show. Who's like, yeah, another team somewhere. Doesn't matter. I think he won the Grey Cup once or something. I don't remember.
It doesn't matter because the punchline is the best part here.
I thought the punchline was the headline. This is what I got out of everything you said.
It gets better. It gets better, Carlos.
And then buy 2 CryptoPunks.
So they have been fined 5% of their revenue for the next year, like the UEFA revenue, as well as a $15 million fine, or €15 million fine. Okay. So now you have every team that's been involved in this so far, of the teams that have said, we're sorry, we're out, this was a bad idea, our fans didn't like it, yada, yada, yada. Okay. They have been fined, they have been punished in some way, they have come to an agreement with either UEFA or their home league. All right. However, the 3 teams that are still like, we're doing this, although I don't know how, but they still haven't said they're not, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Juventus, UEFA has suspended legal action against them. Because remember, they're like, oh, you've violated the UEFA charter, yada, 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 court of justice, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So
I'm a big fan of the court of justice issue.
So 9 of the 12 teams have said, okay, fine, we'll eat our humble pie. Here's some money. The teams that have remained defiant and said, screw you, currently have no consequences.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing, Dave. They have not acknowledged wrongdoing. So, like, how can you punish us if we don't even acknowledge we did anything wrong? I advocate for the strategy.
And it's
They're
working.
like, look,
and it's hilarious.
We know what y'all are doing. We know you're just trying to leverage for buying 2 CryptoPunks. Don't lie to me. This is not about the game. This is not about the game. That is a lie. The cake is true. This is a lie. The good of the game. Trash.
There you go, Carlos. And that, my friend, is the Pretentious Cross Country Running Report with Dave Turnbull.
Well, as Lord Salt, I have acquiesced to this segment. Well done by you. We can now proceed with the rest of our day, and we got a little bit of Super League salt. But I stand by what I said earlier. The cake is now true, at least for this show. The cake is true. This good of the game. This is what's really happening. Do not fall for their lies, people. Do not be sheeple. Understand the truth. This is what they're doing.
It's all about the attempt to buy CryptoPunks, Carlos. That's what it's all about.
This offends me at such a level, I will remain Lord Salt for the remainder of this podcast, even while I'm eating this cake.
That's fair. All right, Carlos. Now for our CanCon. Let's talk about the NHL playoffs.
May as well.
So we're down to the semifinals. And on one side, we have the New York Islanders versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, which happened last year, I believe, in the playoffs as well. Because, three of the four semifinalists from last year.
Oh, come on.
Right. So you have your
trash.
That wasn't actually meant as a dig towards you, but it kind of
like, mathematically, we ran into it. It's like you're finally learning, even unintentionally. It's, oh, come on, brutal.
Right. And it's interesting. Now, granted, they have a little bit more familiarity because they played each other recently, but they did not play each other this year. That's the one thing that makes these playoffs interesting. And then on the other side of the bracket, you have Les Canadiens, the champions of the North Division, or Kings of the North, as they should be referred to for all time now.
Grey Cup champions, yes. Mm-hmm.
Versus the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which really should still be called the Black Knights.
Well, they should have been called the Black Knights in the first place.
They missed a great marking opportunity there.
I already stated this. I am on the record as stating if they had been the Black Knights, they would be on like their 4th consecutive Stanley Cup. They would be a dynasty to end all dynasties.
And they could be because they've been a great team since they went to Vegas.
That's what I mean. It could have the dream could have been lived. We could have had "'Tis but a flesh wound" as a thing that fans chant Like, guys, this sells itself. It sells itself.
Yeah. And they have not, Montreal and Vegas did not play this year. They did not play last year. So it's been a while since those two teams have played each other. However, I think the 2019-2020 season was the last time, maybe, or 20 whatever. I don't think they've played each other since 2019. But the point is that it'll be interesting because you have a vast underdog, let's say, in Montreal playing the Golden Knights, but we don't know how they really match up because they haven't played each other in a while. We know what their stats are, but we don't know what it's going to look like. Obviously, Montreal has beat a team that was far better than it on paper in Toronto, and they beat Winnipeg fairly easily.
Yeah, considering the series Winnipeg had,
considering the series that Winnipeg had against Edmonton, the theory was that it would have been more of a competitive matchup when Winnipeg would have put up a fight, but then Montreal swept them.
Yeah.
So, which was a bit of a surprising outcome. All of a sudden, Montreal world beaters, and suddenly they can't be beat.
Yeah, and don't give me this. Well, it's because Mark Scheifele, the league took him out. Man, he took himself out with that hit. All right, but the other thing is that I watched all the games of the series. I didn't watch every second of every game, but I watched the majority of it. And in Game 3, Winnipeg looked beat in Game 3, right? Even though they actually scored 2 goals and it went to overtime. But Game 4, they came out and it looked good in the beginning a little bit, and then done. And really it was disappointing. And as a Habs fan, it was great to see them win, and that part was fantastic. But it would have been nice to see a little bit more of a fight. But we'll see what happens with this series. I expect Vegas to win. But then again, we all expected Vegas to beat the Dallas Stars last year, and Dallas beat them 4-1, right? 4-1.
Yeah, basically.
So I would love to see a repeat of that. Only this time they go on. The team that beats Vegas goes on to win the Stanley Cup. But we'll see.
See, I like to think, in the spirit of scintillating analysis, and this is how I interpreted how we got here. I think what happened was that when Winnipeg was facing against Montreal, they realized something. And it's a very logical thing that they thought. And I could totally understand it. In retrospect, it makes perfect sense. They thought to themselves, wait a minute. We won the last Grey Cup. We don't need another one. So, we're done.
Oh, my goodness.
We don't need this. We already did this, man. 2019. We did this shit. We're good. Whatever.
You and the freaking Grey Cup.
Listen, they got to use it for something.
Yeah. Anyway, that's true, because who knows whether they're actually going to play CFL football.
That's what I mean. From now on, the best Canadian team gets the Grey Cup. We're done.
So, and then you have 2.
Whoever buys the most expensive crypto. Yeah, whoever buys the most expensive crypto punk gets the Grey Cup. We'll just come up with reasons to hand it out. We'll be like, here you go.
Why not?
It's like, what happened? It's like, listen, we weren't able to get. We're having a little bit of a shipping delay. Here's the Grey Cup.
Or just say, a lot of these places. And Manitoba, I think, is one of them, that are offering some sort of incentive to get vaccinated against COVID.
You get the Grey Cup?
Get a shot. Once
get
you
the
get
cup?
your second shot, here's the Grey Cup.
I think that's a very excellent use of it.
You know what? I'm going to get them anyway, but that would be something I would be like, yeah, I'd be down for that.
And then you, too, can be a Grey Cup. It'll be like Oprah. You're a Grey Cup champion. You're a Grey Cup champion. You're a Grey Cup champion.
Why not?
Did you just point to all of Canada? You're a Grey Cup champion.
So do you see any other kind of outcome other than Vegas winning? Obviously it's kind of hard to tell, and Montreal is playing really well, although they've now had a little bit of a longer layoff. So we'll see if there's any rust comes out of that. But Vegas seems to be the better team.
From a talent standpoint, it should be Vegas. The other thing is that I can assure you that at the very least, goaltending is usually the differentiating factor, more often than not in the hockey playoffs, and. Marc-Andre Fleury still has something to prove because he is a multi-time Stanley Cup champion. That's not in dispute. But since he's gotten to Vegas, he has been part of making that team relevant immediately. But then you're looking at him as like, he's got to be thinking, you know what? If I can get just one more outside of Pittsburgh, just one more. It's that little extra. It's basically the Marc Messier after Wayne Gretzky left. Can you guys get the job done? Can you figure out a way to do this? Because Crosby and the Penguins, they're in the decline as a franchise. They're there, and the players are still really good, but Malkin may or may not be back. There's a lot of mitigating factors. Crosby was Sid the Kid, but now he's a grown adult. He's not a kid anymore. So as time goes on, wear and tear, injuries, all this plays into it. He's still a very good player, but he's not the player he once was, but still a very good player and still a difference maker on a team that is composed well. The Pittsburgh Penguins are not built to do that anymore, but they've got 3 Stanley Cups out of the deal. So it's not like, they've got something to show for that era. So they've done well. But then Marc-Andre Fleury could put himself into another echelon all time because in wins, goaltender wins, he's right up there now. He does have 3 Stanley Cup rings, so that's good. That puts him right up there. And then, but a fourth puts him into an extra echelon. It puts him into another category entirely because it's hard to get into that category. Not a ton of goaltenders have that many cups, at least not in a modern era, especially because I think Brodeur has 3, so I think he's tied with that. So that would put him ahead of Brodeur. I think Waugh has 4 because I think 2 with Montreal and 2 with Colorado. I think that's right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so because so that would think of that. That would be pretty elite company. That would put you right up there. The only guys that would get ahead of you would be somebody like a Grant Fuhrer, but that was the 80s Oilers. So I'm not treating that exactly the same. And then Billy Smith had the 4 in a row with the Islanders, stuff like that. Like that stuff happens. But with Fleury, it would be with 2 different franchises, like Waugh, but in very different periods of his career. And Marc-Andre Fleury was never seen as a guy like Patrick Waugh, but all of a sudden he would get into that conversation. It would thrust him up another level is what I'm trying to get at.
For sure.
So I'm just saying that as motivation, that sounds pretty good. It feels like that would be like a huge motivator for him to be like, if I could steal a couple of games, if I can get us back there, one more crack at this thing maybe. Because there's no guarantees you get another crack at this next year. There's a lot of circumstances that have gone a certain way the last couple of years, obviously with COVID and everything. Mm-hmm. You never know. Like everything, like I said, Dallas's run last year was a complete accident. It was a fluke. But they had an opportunity. And Tampa's back there. So that's very interesting on that side of the bracket. That's very interesting that Tampa's back there again. Good on them for team building to be able to restructure the team, reload, rebuild. The Islanders, after being punching bags for years, are relevant. They're in position A. They've got a shot. They only got to get ahead one more team, and they're back in the final. Yep. For the first time since the 80s. The last time they were in the final, they faced the Edmonton Oilers. And Wayne Gretzky was in his 20s. It's been a long time.
It's been a while. You know what I mean? I wouldn't mind seeing them do it. If it's not going to be Montreal, I would hope that it would be the Islanders.
Yeah, but I think somebody did a listing where they showed a bunch of the different matchup possibilities, and there's some interesting ones. There's some kind of like Tampa Bay and Vegas would be kind of boring. I wouldn't be that interested in it. But almost every other combination is interesting. It's compelling.
Which is unfortunate because that's the most likely matchup you're going to get.
Probably, yeah.
But, we'll see, right? It'll be interesting to see if, how good some of these divisions actually have been or not. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of talk as sort of the North Division as being the AAA of the NHL right now.
Well, like I said, and I'm one of those people to say it. Like I said, Montreal is the underdog. But at the end of the day, if they can get it done, it will elevate. It'll give them their shot. It'll be their first real opportunity in a very long time. But otherwise, if they fail, where's your Grey Cup now? And Marc-Andre Fleury will spit in their general direction. Just no good. You don't want it. You got to do better. Do better. You're not even facing the Black Knights. If you're facing the Black Knights, well, then you're swept in 3. But Carlos, it's best 3. It's done.
It doesn't matter because it wouldn't matter what you did to them. It would not matter what Montreal did because it would always be 'tis but a flesh wound.
Correct. But since it's the Golden Knights, yeah, you got a shot. At least you got a chance. There's an opportunity there. You never know. But yes. No, it'll be interesting. I'm interested in this Final Four because at least there's some compelling matchups. I am disappointed in Colorado. I will say I am disappointed in Colorado. I actually had them going to the final and potentially winning. I did put a little wager on those guys, but no, they just disappointed again. And I think Nathan McKinnon did a post-game interview where he was disappointed too, because he's been a great player. I did see that. Yeah, he's been a great player, and they don't have anything to show for it. And that team looked like it had firepower. That team looked like it had real ability, and it's like, no, Vegas dispatched you. That's why I say I'm wondering if Marc-Andre Fleury is just a man possessed. He really wants it, and for his legacy, it would just, like I said, he will be in the Hall of Fame. He's got all the other pieces you need. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if he wants to put himself up on that pantheon and get into that short list conversation of the top guys. Because when you start stacking hardware like that, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. So let's do this. I'm going to talk up quickly, do a little sports card market report kind of dealy, and talk about a couple of things real quick.
What else has sold for way too much money, Carlos?
Right now, so I'll tell you this. I'll tell you that for the most part, the sports card market is a little bit of a downturn. Not in everything, because it's never in everything. That's not a thing. But there have been some areas like the basketball guys, they inflated a lot of those prices so high it had nowhere to go but down. And some of
Right.
these other markets too. But we use the small scale. And I brought some stuff just to visual aids and to have a little fun with it because I wanted to show. Because I picked up a lot of this stuff a couple of years ago when it was a lot cheaper. So we got our boy, Vladdy Jr.
Nice.
So there's an autograph.
Autographed.
Yeah, it's a rookie autograph basically. So some of this stuff is going for crazy amounts. This one's a nice one. This is an immaculate RPA.
Nice. Is that a jersey? It's a piece of jersey as well. Yeah, it looks like an R from.
It's a piece of patch. Yeah,
Nice. That's a nice card.
it is. And this is the parallel out of 49. So basically, if Vladdy Jr. goes and keeps trying to get into the Triple Crown, it's like, so my palatial estate, you say.
Possibly.
But I've been having some.
It will never be a CryptoPunk, Carlos.
You never know. You never know. But I'll show you guys some other stuff real quick here. So these, like I said, I did the work already some time ago. This was all purchased a while ago, and I'll give you context on a couple of how some of these are going for. So there's your optic rookie for Vladdy Jr. There's the parallel of it, kind of a refractor design, and I got a whole stack of them, including
Nice.
autograph versions, including shiny autograph versions. So it's like there's a bunch of this stuff because, like I said, I accumulated it when it was a lot cheaper. Some of this stuff, like I've been looking into it. I'll tell you, and I'll give you one quick example. I won't go through all of it, but I'll give you one more quick example. Some of these things. So these are his. Oh, that's the refractor. I forgot. So there's just Topps Chrome Rookie,
Nice.
and these are all different types of refractors. Well, all these things are going for like 100, 200, and some of the graded versions $500, $600, $700.
Jeez.
So how many am I showing you a stack? I'm showing you a whole stack of them. How many
Yeah.
you want?
So when does Carlos start selling those?
Oh, I've already started. I've already started collecting some cash. Here's a good one. This is from a subset called Titan, and this is included in a couple of different series. This is a special. Panini does these like first off the line, so you can only pull these in first off the line. This is the orange version. These are numbered to 17. That's a much tougher piece to come by.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, I'm sitting on a whole stack of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So, yeah, keep hitting those home runs, Vladdy. I'm good. So, I'm going to be cashing in a couple of these poker chips as we're going along here. That's all I'm saying. And, of course, we will conclude Gold Soto.
Because why not?
Hey, listen, my boy Juan Soto has to be acknowledged. Right now, Vladdy Jr. is doing his thing. And he hit his 20th home run today before we came on the air.
Was that the MLB lead?
It is. He's leading the MLB in home runs, RBIs, and I believe the American League in average, technically in line for the Triple Crown.
All right. So, Carlos, can I ask you a sports card question since we're talking about sports cards right now?
This would be the segment we're doing it, yes.
So, I have a question about this because something else has come up in MLB and something I was interested in a little bit, talk about a little bit. So, I'm curious. I want to tell you a story, and then I want to ask you a question.
I was laughing because I thought originally you were going to ask the question. I was going to say yes, Dave. It does move me ever closer to my CryptoPunk dream. Please continue.
So, this week, I don't know if you heard it or not, but Garrett Cole did a press conference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, in which he was asked a question, and I can't remember what the specific substance was, but he was asked, has he ever doctored the ball basically using a specific substance?
It was probably, it was because, real quick, just for context for everybody, when it comes to baseballs and doctoring it, if it's a substance and not an emery board or something like that to scratch the surface, you can make the surface rough or you can make it slick. Those are the two of the ways that a pitcher could doctor a baseball, amongst other ways, but those are the two like most common. If you're going to do something, sometimes you'll under the brill of the cap, you'll put like Vaseline or something slick. Another thing though, sometimes instead of slick, you want to go with something that makes it tackier, stickier. So pine tar. So pine tar is a very common way of doing it because then it makes it so your grip is more so then you can have a little bit more control. And I believe pine tar is how you would increase spin rate because you're increasing the tackiness.
Yeah. So I can't remember again. I wish I remember the name of it.
I would guess it's pine tar because I know that they've been looking at
it was a sticky substance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. But anyway, they asked him in a press conference, have you used this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There we go. Here it is. Here's the specific question. I found it.
Sure.
Have you ever used spider tack while pitching?
Sure.
Yeah, that's what they asked. So it's a yes or no question. It's either, it's a gotcha question, but it's either yes, I have, or no, I have not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or maybe no comment, or you get up and leave. But he did everything that he could in his power to not say yes, but also not say no. Basically, I don't really know how to answer that question. Really? You don't know how to answer the question? That's a yes or no question? You either say yes or no. And he went on this big diatribe about it, never actually really answering the question. But also his spin rate has been down recently since MLB said they were going to crack down on this. So,
Yep.
Anyway, my question to you is, does something like this, I know pitchers don't have the same value as position players in the sports card market.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But is something like this potentially affect the value of a pitcher's card?
So potentially yes, but one fact you have to bear in mind is that there is a large difference between we think so and we know so. So saying his spin rate is down, that's a metric. We can actually look at that and say, yeah, that sounds like smoking got, but it's circumstantial. Think in the evidence, the versions of different types of evidence. The problem is that's circumstantial. We don't know. It's not that people get the benefit of the doubt. That's not a fair statement. That's not an accurate statement either. However, one thing you can keep in mind is that if a player is definitively caught, that's different. If they're definitively caught, you can be like, or if a player infamously does like a strongly worded denial and then they're caught after, it's actually worse.
You mean like Rafael Palmeiro?
No, but that's exactly the example I wanted to use. It. Thank you for bringing it up because I have a visual reference.
Ooh, this is not planned whatsoever.
But this timing works out. So here's a Rafael Palmeiro Atomic Refractor. It's a beautiful looking card. Mm-hmm. It's got a nice little Cuban flag in the background and everything. These things are gorgeous. These are from the late 90s. This is 97.
All right.
Rafael Palmeiro is a 500 home run hitter who hit 3,000 hits. He should be a first ballot Hall of Famer lock, but he has never lived down that testimony where he basically shook his finger at Congress and be like, how dare you accuse me of doing steroids? I would never. And then he got caught.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Steroids or not, 500 home runs and 3,000 hits. 500 home runs, it'll help you. But 3,000 hits? Mark McGwire didn't get anywhere close to 3,000 hits. And like he benefited from, steroids as much as anybody. He hit almost 600 home runs, more than Palmeiro, but 3,000. Palmeiro was a great hitter who happened to have some power. But the more impressive feat is the 3,000 hits, and he's on the outside of the Hall of Fame looking in.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense.
I was able to didn't have 3,000 hits.
No, but he had 2,900. Like he was close.
He was close.
Yeah, and if he had continued playing out his career like normal, he probably another year or so. Because in his last season, he was still playing pretty well. But outside of San Francisco, nobody wanted him.
Yeah. And he was 42 too when he retired.
Yeah, but if he plays another year or two, he gets 3,000 hits. So like Bonds was a Hall of Famer anyway. 3,000 hits is hard. You have to be consistent for year after year after year. Steroids are not going to help you get the 3,000. Most of the steroid guys did not get the 3,000 hits. They're not even close. Most of them. So it's a very difficult thing to do. It stands out when you accomplish, and when you combine the two things, that's like an Eddie Murray. There's a certain guy, Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron is an all-time great. But what to me makes him greater is that he had 3,700 hits. If he had 0 home runs, he'd still have 3,000 hits. That's a great hitter. Not just a great home run hitter. It means a great hitter. So, so still, all things considered, if I remove all of Rafael Palmeiro's home runs, that's 2,500 hits. That's still a real good career. But in reality, he hits, some of those home runs are legit. Like in his early part of his career, I promise you, most of the home runs he hit are probably fine. But did he use performance enhancers? We pretty much know that at this point, but he is still being punished to this day, which I understand. I totally get it. But that means a card like this, where some of the premium guys would sell for a pretty penny, I got this for $2. It's a beautiful card. So for me, as a person who enjoys the game and appreciates, I'll buy this for $2. No problem. So there you go. I had visual aids.
There we go. I like it. I like how that just happened to be there.
Yeah. So for the pitcher, though, right now, it's not going to affect Garrett Cole because that isn't proof of anything other than he doesn't know how to answer a question. But now, if his decreased spin rate means that he starts getting lit up all the time and now he sucks, well, then his career stats are going to suffer anyway, and that's going to take care of itself. It's not even going to be a steroid accusation. It's going to be like, well, now you're garbage. Mm-hmm. So, because you haven't accumulated the totality of a complete career.
Yeah.
The only reason Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds are still on the ballot and they're like, oh, will they get in? Won't they get in? is because their stats are so overwhelming that yeah, they got enhanced by steroids, but it's like they're still ridiculous stats.
Yeah, it's true.
So even if I knock 20 or 30% off, they're probably still Hall of Famers, even with that. So it's like, how much did it help? It certainly did, but how much? I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I would answer the question. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. Thank you.
Yep. So I'll propose the next topic.
All right, please.
Dave, I sent you a link.
You did.
I sent you a link. Now, let's do this. I'm going to give context. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Tell me what you think you saw and what your opinions were of what you saw. And then I'm going to give context. I'll explain what it is, the context of it, and all that. But give me your impression first.
All right. So Carlos sent me a link to a YouTube video of part of an episode of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, and this is from the WWE YouTube channel. It was legit.
And this was the most recent episode of Raw as well.
Correct.
A show that I do not watch.
And this was the main event segment, by the way.
Okay. But I do know, obviously, some of the wrestlers that from whatever. Anyway, the point is, so there was a segment called Alexa's Playground.
It's Alexa's Playhouse. Yeah, I think it's Alexa's Playground. It's
Something
Playground
like that?
or Playhouse. Yeah.
So I don't know. So you have Alexa Bliss and her character who's on a swing, and she has this doll. And then you had with Shayna Baszler.
Shayna Baszler.
And
I'll give some context to these characters and who they are, and I'll give a little more information shortly.
So she comes out, and basically Alexa's like, "We want to be friends with you, but you have to apologize to my doll." And she's
Lily.
like, "I'm Lily, yeah." And she's like, "I'm not apologizing." And then she's like, "Okay, I apologize." And then she's like, "I'm so sorry." And then throw some qualifier on it that means she's not really sorry, and then stomps on the doll's face.
The qualifier is that you're a stupid doll.
Yeah, and then leaves. And then she goes. Now she's in the back of the performance center because they're not in arenas yet.
Yeah, but don't skip ahead. Hold on.
Okay.
Don't forget exploding pyro. She's chasing her up the ramp.
Oh yes. So as she is leaving the arena or the ring, the exploding pyro is chasing her up the ramp, and then it cuts to shots of her going through the back, going through doors, finding doors locked. Anyway, she gets to a room that has a mirror in it. Looks like a hotel room, and she's in the room, and she looks in the mirror and she sees the doll Lily in the mirror. And then she turns around and the doll's not there.
Correct.
And then she looks at the mirror again and it's not there. And then she smashes the mirror, but you can still see Lily in the mirror. And then I believe it ended.
Yeah, basically it ended with her screaming.
Yeah.
And that's how Raw went off the air.
Okay.
So first, your general thoughts.
So my general thoughts are, it's hard to give you everything about it because I don't watch Raw on a regular basis. But
I want it without context. I'll give the context, but I want your thoughts without context.
I think I like the Alexa Bliss character.
Okay.
Right? Who's supposedly, from what I've seen, this sweet, innocent person who actually has some kind of weird cultish. Was she part of the Wyatt family?
I will 100% explain the context, but just go from where.
So she has some weird cultish, creepy part about her.
Sure.
Where in one segment she's all nice and cute, and the next segment she does this, she does the face, the kind of like with her face kind of thing, and then shows up. It's almost like she shows up behind people and does stuff. I don't know.
Okay.
Right. But when I was watching it, I'm thinking to myself, so this is what Raw has become, right? This is the gimmick, right? And obviously, it's been a long time. I know I'm getting back into wrestling, but it's been a long time since I was into wrestling, and then I really started paying attention again. So there's a gap there. But obviously, this is not the WWE I remember. And I'm thinking to myself, Raw is losing. Like Raw is not doing well in the ratings.
No.
Yet there is nothing I saw which is going to make me want to watch this show on a regular basis, or even watch the show on a semi-regular basis. So so what I was thinking at the end of it was, Carlos, I have questions. So many questions.
Yep.
That's what I came to at the end of this.
That's fair. So let me give a little context first, and then let's circle around. And if you've got some questions, we can talk through them. Okay.
All right.
So quick. Let me give the quick recap. You don't need to watch all that crap. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch most of that crap, but I kept an eye from a distance. I've always. With WWE, I can't watch that show now. It's unwatchable to me. Like it's a slog. It's misery. I can't do it. However, with that said, I still keep an eye on it just because I want to be knowledgeable. I want to know what's going on. I got to have an idea. So I do understand the storyline. I know conceptually where we are and a little bit of where we're going, just based on my logic and where I think it would go. But here's the short version. This Alexa Bliss character is a play off of the most recent Bray Wyatt character, where he came back and became the Fiend. That whole deal where he's got the kind of the split, we can call it split personality, we can call it an alter ego, whatever. He gets possessed by a demon, and now he's spoo, scary, horror movie guy. Got time. So that you got that going on. So what happened is the storyline got melded in. I'll give you, like I said, I'll give you a little context because it'll help us get back to the present. So I'll bring us back around to this. So they were doing that for a bit, and the problem the Fiend always had, for me, was that WWE never fully committed to it. So Bray Wyatt came up with this interesting idea. It's got a backstory. It's got a lot of things going on. It's got interweaving characters. It's got kind of fourth wall breaking, a little bit of parody played into it, some satire. It's actually a very interesting character that could be done, but you got to be very careful how you do it because you're basically boo, scary, I have superpowers guy. So you've got to be careful the environment you put it in because you can't pull it off everywhere. In front of a live audience, it's possible, but it's trickier. You have to really stage stuff. You have to come up with different ideas to make it work. In the pandemic time where you're inside of this controlled environment, you can really screw around. And that's what's been going on the last couple of months, in the last year or so. But the Bray Wyatt character, Bray Wyatt had this whole vision for it, but then WWE got its claws on it and started scaling back. The problem is with Bray Wyatt as a character previously, and then with the Fiend version of this character and whatever other iterations have come out, is the Bray Wyatt character always has one fatal flaw. He's always circled around the idea of being a cult leader or having the occult powers or whatever the case may be. There was even a bit with the Wyatt family where he quote unquote stole the Undertaker's powers. The Undertaker is a stupid character. If we really analyze it like as a character, if we remember it's a TV show and anything can happen theoretically, then it's fine. But in concept, it's moronic. It's absolutely moronic. But then at one point, Bray Wyatt stole his powers. But then for some reason, this never manifested into a world title. Eventually, he did win the world title, but then it was like a nondescript thing. And then he had a feud with Randy Orton and it involved a lot of really cheap parlor tricks and dumb stuff. And then he lost the title. So like, why does a guy with supernatural powers have such a hard time retaining a title or even winning a title? Why doesn't he want a title? What is his purpose? What does he want? The presentation's cool, but there's no aim to it. There's no direction. Like, what are you? If I have these superpowers, then I guess technically I could do whatever I want. I could win every title. I'd be the greatest. Why would I not always win? I have powers. I should win everything, theoretically. But they never get there. They never do that. There's always this weird mix. So what happened is at one point they did a bit where the Fiend was feuding with Braun Strowman, the formerly employed Braun Strowman. So he was feuding with Braun Strowman, and they decided to do a cinematic match where they went back to the compound. And Braun Strowman is basically going through, and there's all these psychological warfare and this voodoo magic, spooky stuff. More of kind of what you saw in that segment, a little bit of that.
Okay.
Now, what happened is they did a bunch of callbacks. Like I said, Bray Wyatt is very creative. So he comes up with different ways of doing callbacks and different interesting things because he did a cinematic match with John Cena at a WrestleMania a couple of years ago. That was pretty interesting. And they played around with some stuff with John Cena's character. John Cena had some input too, but they came up with all these interesting ways to call back to John Cena's past, his previous iterations and all that. The Thugonomics John Cena and his initial debut John Cena. And he even pretended to be Hulk Hogan from the NWO sort of, but except as John Cena. So they played off these concepts and these ideas that people had posited over time. It's very cleverly done. So technically he beat John Cena at WrestleMania, but this Fiend character can never get any traction. It's bizarre. So what happened is in this thing, they did a lot of weird stuff, but at one stage of it, they did this thing where like a siren is calling to Braun Strowman. And the way it's presented, it's like, oh my God, this is Sister Abigail, which, Bray Wyatt had referenced for many years, Sister Abigail, who was never a physical person and you never saw them or heard from them or whatever, but they existed in this theoretical. He would reference Sister Abigail in promos. His finisher was called Sister Abigail. Like there's all these references to it, but you never see this entity, whatever it's supposed to be. So suddenly you see Sister Abigail, and then Sister Abigail pulls off the veil, and it's actually Alexa Bliss. Now, here's the thing. Alexa Bliss is actually quite a good actress. So you got a taste of that a little bit from what you saw there. So she's actually quite a good actress, and she actually has some acting chops, even though not too many people knew about it prior to, and I don't think she's formally trained, but she's clearly got some acumen for it. She clearly has some ability to be able to portray whatever silly thing they ask her to do. This was supposed to be a one-off. The idea was that it wasn't actually Alexa Bliss. It was Sister Abigail manifested as Alexa Bliss because Braun Strowman had a brief partnership in a WWE like mixed tag challenge a year or two before, where fans got behind this team Little Big, which was Alexa Bliss and Braun Strowman, and there were like little allusions to a potential budding romance. Like, it was a deep cut callback to use Alexa Bliss's image as part of this thing, but it wasn't supposed to be Alexa Bliss. It was supposed to be a figment of Braun Strowman's imagination to trick him in the vision of Alexa Bliss.
Okay.
So, like, I'm giving you guys a very deep background here because there's a lot to go through. Like I said, layers. In terms of layers, this is as good as WWE storytelling gets, but the reason is because Bray Wyatt came up with it. It wasn't WWE. So he came up with this callback, and it was very interesting in that sense. But people really loved it on social media. So at some point down the road, and it was sometime later, at one point, The Fiend was doing its thing where The Fiend was like showing up and terrorizing people randomly. Mm-hmm. And at one point, The Fiend suddenly showed up while Alexa Bliss was out doing her talk show thing. And what happened is, over the next several weeks and months, initially it was like, like everybody else, horrified, blah, blah, blah. But it became a thing where it almost like Alexa Bliss was like infatuated or possessed by like the spirit of The Fiend, in the sense that she was like, be like in a trance and like be hanging around, and like you'd see The Fiend wouldn't attack her or anything, but it would just be this like presence that would like affect her in certain ways. And then she would flip back and forth between her normal demeanor, because at that time she was a tag team with Nikki Cross. And then all of a sudden there's this weird thing. But again, WWE drops the ball. Like, they start down this path, and it looks like eventually Nikki Cross and her are going to cross paths and have a feud or whatever. And they sort of did. But like over time, more and more, Alexa Bliss got sucked into the vortex of The Fiend. Until at one point, they had the Playhouse that Bray Wyatt has, and all of a sudden Alexa Bliss showed up as another character at the Playhouse, basically joining him as this like Saturday morning cartoon character that's like overly happy. So that's where you're getting that sense, that taste of it. It's still carrying over from that. So then basically Alexa Bliss became like an associate of Bray Wyatt / The Fiend, and like she was there like helping out and do whatever. But at the same time, she's like developing her own occult powers. And at one point, The Fiend gets destroyed, gets burned by Randy Orton, and she resurrects The Fiend using dark magic, because it's all being sucked into this vortex of things. But then, at the height of the moment, another feud with Randy Orton, because it's always friggin' Randy Orton. Randy Orton ends up winning this time because Alexa Bliss turns on The Fiend. And now The Fiend loses, and now Alexa Bliss is off on her own. And now the retcon excuse is that she realized that she didn't need The Fiend. She has her own powers. But then we retcon it again, and like, I guess the source of her powers is now the doll, who is her friend from childhood, even though it's doll. So like, is the doll possessed? Is the doll the source of power? Does she control it? Does the doll control her? This is basically what we're playing with now.
All right.
So this is what's going on with all that. But here's the thing, in the spirit of what I said before. Okay, so now you have the occult powers. She actually was on the verge of being women's champion, but she was technically feuding with Randy. So after the Fiend thing went away, before the Fiend came back, technically Alexa Bliss was feuding with Randy Orton.
So is there anyone currently who's not feuding with Randy Orton, apparently? That's the secret to WWE's success.
Well, here's the funny thing. There was a meme out there where a bunch of different people would like meet up, even if they're not feuding. They would end up like having an interaction with Randy Orton, and there was a streak of them for a little while there, and all of them were like cut. So it was like, so
you're
Randy
saying
Orton
it's kind of like the 2K20 video game, where
but even more powerful. Like, it's directly, if you come in proximity of Randy Orton, you are now fired, but you're gone. Get out.
Well, actually, I did see a meme about that where it was talking about Randy Orton's charitability and how charitable he is, because he opened up a home for out of work wrestlers in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And all those people that gone to AEW.
But that's the reference. Like, it was this weird thing where like one after another would be like that. It was like their last interaction on TV or their last feud was with Randy Orton, and then they found themselves on the unemployment line and then went to AEW. They'd be like, really? This is what we're dealing with? Anyway, so the thing is, so now Alexa Bliss is on her own and past the Randy Orton feud and all that. But technically, she's just kind of hanging around, and it's like now she's feuding with Shayna Baszler, and I'll come back to Shayna Baszler in 2 seconds. But the thing is that, okay, so she's doing all this, but again, occult powers, all that great stuff, whatever, fine, boo, scary stuff. But at this point, she should probably just win the damn title. Why is she feuding with Shayna Baszler? Now, like, from a logical standpoint, like, Shayna Baszler is beneath you. Go compete for the title and win the damn thing.
But also,
you have powers.
Also, exactly your point. Why can't you just use these occult powers to win the title?
Like, she should just be able to do that at will. And anytime just show up and they're like, I want that title. But now it's like, now I point at you and like the ceiling falls on your head or something. Like it can be whatever stupid thing you want.
Doesn't matter.
She has powers.
And until they go on the road, which is until mid-July, they have the power to do basically whatever they want because everything's in-house and they can roll however they want to roll.
Yeah. Now I'll come back to that in 2 seconds. So what the important thing. So now quickly, Shayna Baszler, just for context. So now I've given you the Alexa Bliss backstory to get us to the present. Now we know how we got here.
Gotcha.
Okay. Shayna Baszler, she is a former MMA fighter. Okay. She's a friend of Ronda Rousey. She's a former MMA fighter, but she was pretty accomplished in MMA. She did well for herself, and then she came to NXT to train for wrestling, and she's actually taken to it quite nicely. And in NXT, her character was portrayed as a badass, and she would fight everybody and like antagonize people, and was like a monster heel who could.
How is she different from Ronda Rousey's character in WWE?
I'll get to that. So what happened is she's got all this, and then she became NXT champion twice. And over the course of those 2 title reigns, she is actually the longest combined reigned NXT champion of all time. She has had the NXT championship for well over 530 days or whatever it was. Okay. And then she got to the main roster, floundered, had a bunch of feuds where she probably could have done something. She had the feud that led to a match with Becky Lynch at WrestleMania where probably she should have won the title, but they didn't execute that. And then they let her flounder. She became tag team champions with Nia Jax, and that just kind of has happened and gone nowhere. And now they've lost the title and they've got all that nonsense. And now she's feuding with a doll. This is where Shayna Baszler is. So this is like developed a lot of frustration. We're like, but Shayna Baszler's really good at this like badass fighting character. Right. Now the difference between her and Ronda Rousey is that Ronda Rousey is even more marketable, and WWE decided, yes, we're going to market you. You're going to be our top person, and let's call a spade. My opinion. The difference between the two of them, Ronda Rousey is more attractive. So Vince decided, we will market you. We'll pay you top dollar. We'll feed you the championship. Shayna Baszler, you're really good. You can fight the doll, but you may fight the doll.
Yeah, I could. That sounds like a very Vince thing.
Yeah, that's my theory. I believe this is the rationale for why you take somebody who has, the credentials to be like, no, we could market you as a legit badass who is a constant contender, probably gets the title a couple of times, and then is a really scary heel with the title and has a decent run with it. You already did it in NXT. All you got to do is borrow the formula. It's already been done.
Yeah.
One of her title reigns for over 400 days. Like, you let her hold it for over a year, where she beat all comers, and eventually she was beaten, and we move on. But she was a credible champion when she was champion. Like, it made sense.
Yeah.
And she's an MMA fighter. So, like, she could put a bunch of submissions on you, and she could strike and do all kinds of stuff. Like, she looks legit. She can. But instead, let's have her fight a doll. And then we get to the segment, and in this segment, in effect, what you've done is you've stuck Alexa Bliss in this stasis where she's doing these feuds that don't matter, that don't mean anything, that are just bizarre, just because you can. You put this in your main event segment. This is what people went off the air with. People that stuck around to the 3rd hour of Monday Night Raw got to enjoy this to close the show. This is what you ended the show with. And what you ended the show with was a B-level horror movie with all the tropes, including you're in an arena, quote unquote. Obviously, you recorded it another day or earlier in the day or whenever you actually recorded it. It was pre-taped. But so you're in an arena on a show that's supposed to be live, where there's supposed to be camera crews. Why don't you run to catering? You'll have friends who will help you, or enemies who will help you, or some random staff member who you can use as a human shield. Instead, you run into an empty room, like a bad horror movie. It doesn't make any sense.
It's a bad horror movie. It is a bad horror movie, Carlos.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And even the little thing with the mirror, I was joking because I was watching it, because I watched the clip initially, and I was thinking, what would be funnier if instead of Lily, it was the Ultimate Warrior. Because they did that in WCW with Hogan, where he had the thing, where literally Eric Bischoff is standing beside him, and Hulk Hogan is pantomiming being mortified because the Ultimate Warrior is in the mirror, and nobody else can see it. Even the people in the room, except for Hogan, and the people watching on TV. Because it's stupid. So really what I got out of this is that Lily is actually the Ultimate Warrior. Or the Ultimate Warrior is actually Lily. Or Lily, the doll, learned her powers from the Ultimate Warrior. Ironically, their promo skills are about the same. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to that. Who knows? But the other thing is, besides the B horror movie acting and all of it, is that when you get in front of live crowds, you can't pull off this bullshit.
It's true.
You're not going to show that to the crowd because you'd have to put it on the Jumbotron. You're going to show that to a live crowd. That. Really? No. No, you're not. So like it's aimless. It doesn't have a direction it can ever go. Like what's it supposed to go from here? I could probably think of some stuff, but it could go. Now, there was a podcast that brought up an excellent point that I will close this segment on.
All right.
And that is this. One of WWE's problems, in a multitude, a myriad of problems, is inconsistency, even with storytelling and different things. There are segments where WWE will have a segment where somebody will be talking in the back or whatever, and everybody clearly knows there's a cameraman there.
Okay.
And they'll acknowledge the cameraman, or they'll look right at the camera and say, like, step back or whatever. The cameraman is acknowledged in some way. In this B horror movie moment, the cameraman isn't real, or we're supposed to believe they're not real, but sometimes they're real, but other times they're not.
Right.
So in this case, here's the question I asked you. Is the idea supposed to be, and this is just a question I would pose based on the little clip you saw and the context I just gave you. So question, was the vision of Lily in the mirror supposed to be like a haunting, or is Shayna Baszler losing her mind? It's not clear.
No.
Like it's...
But that might be intentional.
But you could argue both. Exactly. You could argue both cases. You could make the case for either. Maybe she's losing her mind and it's her imagination, or she's being haunted by the killer doll. Either way. But the other thing is, to what end? To what end? And secondly, in addition to that, why is it in this case the cameraman isn't real? And also, are we the audience also supposed to be losing our mind? Are we being haunted because we saw Lily too?
Probably.
These are all like, think your theater background, think the drama background. This is an important question because how you're showing me this is supposed to in some way theoretically give me okay, am I also supposed to be losing my mind, or am I seeing it because because the thing is, she could pretend there's a doll there and we don't have to see anything.
Correct.
And then maybe she's losing her mind, but we're seeing it. So maybe she's being haunted. You could interpret it either way. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. So there's a million little problems with this. Like I'm quibbling about relatively minor things, but it's all part of the presentation. It's all part of what you just showed me. So for me, this doesn't compel me. I'm not interested. And also, what's the result? So they get into a feud. They have a match. Does the doll possess Shayna Baszler? Is she now like, Alexa Bliss's ninja who will help?
Yeah.
her?
Like what's your end game, right?
And even if that's the case, like what's the end game of that? Like to what end? Why don't you just go win the damn title? Like this is a meaningless feud that leads to nowhere. For either one of them. There's no winning this feud. Like, who wins this feud?
Yeah.
The doll. The
Probably.
doll wins the feud and becomes champion or something. I don't know.
It's probably got to be the doll.
And then she fights the spirit of the Ultimate Warrior in the celestial plane. Obviously. Duh.
Clearly.
But that's the reason why I showed it to you, because you saw how much time I was able to take, break down, give you the background, lead us back to the present. And now here we are. And we're no better for it. This is WWE in a nutshell. I was able to give you all the context, all the background, lay you back in. And all of a sudden, it's like, are you any closer to figuring out what the fuck you just saw than you were before?
Probably not. Probably not.
Now imagine if you were a regular viewer of this. This was your reward. Congratulations, loyal viewer. We're giving you this.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
That sounds like a punishment to me. I'm glad that I basically, when something comes up that is bizarre that I hear about, I'm glad that they'll put the clip up on YouTube, because I don't want to watch that shit in real time. I don't want to watch it on the actual show. No, thank you.
Yeah.
At least I can focus on that one specific segment, and having the background that I do, I can put the rest of the pieces together myself. I don't want to sit there and watch that show. It's not a show I want to watch.
Yeah, man. I don't know what. Yeah. Right. Like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I wanted to present that because that's the current state of WWE. By contrast, AEW is doing its thing. Are all the storylines brilliant? Nope. Are they perfect? Not even close. But most of the things have some progression. You can kind of figure out the steps as you're moving along.
And honestly, I think unless you're Jim Cornette, you think it's probably a good product.
Yeah.
Because Jim Cornette has some serious hate on for AEW.
Well, you should correct your statement to say Jim Cornette has some serious hate on.
That's true. But yeah, it's true. But one of those things he has some serious hate on for is the AEW.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things, like,
which I feel is very unjust. I feel it just goes to the fact that he doesn't like Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
And I think he probably has some legitimate gripes, although, the style they have in Japan and some of the things they do in Japan are designed for a Japanese audience, not for a North American audience. And sometimes it feels like Jim Cornette doesn't get that.
Well, Dave, listen, you got to understand. Kenny Omega is a multi-time world champion right now. He's got many belts. And honestly, why would you not take this man seriously? Like, does he not look like a serious person? Does he not look like somebody you should take seriously? Let me finish. Does he not look like the kind of guy that you sit there and like, you were frightened of this man? Like the gravitas in which he speaks, it doesn't feel like farcical and silly at all. He's not the kind of guy that would, back in the Japanese days, fight a 9-year-old girl in a match that actually happened, or fight an invisible man that might have actually happened. The point is that he's a serious wrestler, Dave. A serious wrestler.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's a lot more serious in AEW than he is in Japan.
It's hard not to be. He had a match with the 9-year-old girl. That's a thing. That's a thing that actually occurred.
That is true. This is true. I have seen footage of that. It's just bizarre.
Champion.
But and he's Canadian. Don't you forget.
Well, he's from Winnipeg. They're weird.
You know who else is from Winnipeg, Carlos?
He's also weird. He's also weird, though. Like, can we acknowledge that Chris Jericho is a lot of fun, but can we acknowledge he's also a very weird man?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, an exceedingly weird man. Like, he really is. Now, there was a good, I'll finish off the thing. Now we'll shift over to AEW, and then we'll shift over to other topics real quick here.
All right.
There was a little segment, though, in not this past episode, but maybe the week before, that it was really fun. It was a good callback. What I enjoy about AEW is sometimes they'll do a callback. If you're a longtime fan, occasionally you're rewarded with a little Easter egg. It's a joke you'll only get if you know. If you're a younger fan, like, it'll go right over your head because it's like, I don't get the reference. It doesn't make any sense to me. So there was a segment where one of the guys, I think it was Alex Marvez, he ran to the back to go and try to have a chat with Chris Jericho, and it was Chris Jericho was about to explain if the Inner Circle was going to do the feud with the Pinnacle. So this was some weeks ago now. And he's standing there and talking, and as the guy Marvez walks up, he's sitting there having a chat with Dean Malenko.
Okay.
Now, for anybody who remembers or who knows, I'll give you a quick background. Dean Malenko and Chris Jericho had a very excellent feud back in the WCW days in the mid-90s. And it was a back and forth, many great matches, a lot of very interesting segments, some fun stuff. Even one point, Dean Malenko disguised himself as a luchador, and I don't remember if it was a battle royale or whatever they were doing. And in the end, Chris Jericho was there at the end with this luchador that he thought he was just going to beat up. And then something happened. He had his back turned. The luchador pulls his mask off, and it's Dean Malenko, and then he beats him up, and they had this big feud going on, and it was a big moment because the crowd exploded when he and they realized it was Dean Malenko. But as part of the whole shtick, there was a joke. So I'll give you the joke, and then I'll give you the context for the joke.
All right.
So Marvez is doing that, and then towards the end, Jericho talks back to him, whatever, and he goes, "Hey, now get out of here before the man of 1,000 holds gets mad at you, whatever," because that was Dean Malenko's nickname, Man of 1,000 Holds.
Okay.
So he goes, "Hey, don't get mad before the man of 1,000 holds gets mad at you." And then Malenko is like, "But you still got 4 more than me." And then Jericho turns to him and goes, "I forgot a few." Now here's the thing. Without context, what are they talking about? What does that mean? During the feud, Chris Jericho, as part of his feud, was explaining how he's better than Dean Malenko. He goes, "You're a man of 1,000 holds? I counted. I have 1,004 holds. And I'm going to list them off for you." And he did that during a segment of Nitro.
Okay.
This was the original list. He had this gigantic printout, and he starts reading the list. This was the original list before the list, and all that came after. But he starts reading it, and as he's reading it, he's making up all these ridiculous names. But every couple of names that he's reading off is armbar. Like every 5th or 6th or whatever, armbar. And then he would keep going, but then eventually they went to commercial break. And when they came back from commercial break, they're acting like he's still reading the list, but he's like going like 456, this, 457, armbar. And he would just keep going. And eventually they finally pulled him out of there and whatever. But the joke was he was a man of 1,004 holds. But if you go back to the bit from AEW, he goes, "You still know 4 more than me." And he goes, "I forgot a few." You will not understand that joke if you don't remember mid-90s WCW.
Yeah.
But I do. So I got a kick out of it, and I appreciate it.
It treats you to something that,
that was an Easter egg for me.
You know what they call that in New Orleans, Carlos? They call it a lanyap. Little something extra.
Yeah. But for most people, completely right over their heads. But for me, as soon as I saw that, it put a smile on my face. It's like, I know that reference.
Nice.
And that's why I appreciate AEW threw that in, and Chris Jericho and Dean Malenko threw that in, because if you know, you know. And now, if you heard this, now you know.
There you go.
A couple of people on social media caught that one. They enjoyed it. They're like, nice. That's a callback.
Nice.
Try a callback. It's 25 years.
It's great though that there's enough people around that get it.
Yeah, but it's the little AEW in a nutshell. Again, not perfect. AEW in a nutshell though is you get to see some of the future, some of these people that I had never seen before, that I get to see some of the stuff they do, and it's fun. But then I'll still occasionally get these little nuggets. By the way, you've been a fan a long time. Here, let me throw you this little bone here. This one's just for you, because they're not going to get it. But this one's just for you. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's the combination. That's what makes it a more enjoyable program for me, to the point that I'll go out of my way occasionally, not all the time. I'll go watch the YouTube show, because they'll do a couple of matches and some fun stuff in there, and I can get acquainted with some of these characters outside of the main show. And I'm like, no, it's enjoyable for me. I get to have some fun with it. And I think that's kind of the old school wrestling style when I used to watch the shows regularly. And a lot of those shows are a lot of my references, because I used to watch a lot of these shows all the time. Today, WWE makes 5 hours of programming a week. I can't watch 1 second of it. Not 1 second. I refuse. Not doing it.
Yeah.
And that is why. The contrast between what I just explained to you and that fun little side joke, it was 10 seconds. If you blinked, you missed it.
Right.
I caught it. I saw it. But there you go.
I like it.
That's how it works. So anyway, okay. So that's good there. Did you have any other wrestling questions or anything else questions-wise that you want to touch on?
I don't think so. I don't think so in that regard.
Good stuff. All right. So do we have anything else there on the list that we want to touch on?
Do you have anything else? Because I have something we could talk about, but only if you don't have anything else.
No, let's go. You pick. I had my fun with that segment, so let's go.
So here's our last topic of episode 100. All right, a recurring segment around here. Mm-hmm. Dave made a list. Carlos makes shit up.
Indeed. So this is Dave's list, and not. Now, does it involve armbar?
Best wrestling holds. Go.
Armbar.
So I thought, because we could have a good conversation about this, because I think there's a debate to be had about this. Since so we can go back to the CanCon, sorry. And I'm gonna go, because I still have my list of sports Mount Rushmores. Mm-hmm. So I would like to know your sports Mount Rushmore of hockey. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you mine and my category, and I think there's going to be some overlap here, right? Because I think a lot of these are probably no-brainers for pretty much anybody who follows hockey. Okay. But when you get down to I think, 2 of the 4 that I have on this list, everybody should have at least 2 of them.
Okay.
All right. The other 2, I can see maybe where you might go. All right. And so here's what I did with this. So I said, all right, if you're going to tell the story of hockey, right? You're going to tell the history of hockey. You can't tell it without mentioning these 4 people. All right. Okay. So here's what I went with. Okay. In no particular order, as I always do. But I did write them down. So in this order, number 1, Wayne Gretzky. Mm-hmm. Okay. Number 2, Bobby Orr. Okay. Number 3, Gordie Howe. Mm-hmm. And number 4, Jacques Plante.
Okay.
All right. So I figure that maybe some people are going to be like, why Jacques Plante in my list? And I was thinking, well, I don't think you can have a hockey round, or really like a sports round much more, if there's sort of a niche position that's really important to the game. So in this case, goaltending, and you don't have a goaltender on your list. Mm-hmm. Right. So I put Jacques Plante on that for that reason. And because of the introduction of the hockey mask as well, right? Which is super important, and obviously that's a big part of hockey. And for Jacques Plante to have done that, so that's why he's on the list as the goalie. That's why I put him. Obviously, he has great stats as a goaltender as well, but I put him on there for the innovation part as well. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's hard to argue. I don't think anyone can have a hockey Mount Rushmore without Wayne Gretzky. And then I think, you could potentially make some arguments as to who the other people are going to be. But as I thought about it, I thought about maybe having somebody like Lemieux for a bit. Do you want to go more recent and have somebody like Ovechkin or maybe Crosby? But I went with like the tried, tested, and true, and that's why I have Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, and Gordie Howe as my position players. And yes, obviously there are some forwards and defensemen on there, and then my goalie Jacques Plante, which I feel there has to be a goalie on this list. That's my reasoning. Carlos, what say you?
So your caveat, the way you put it about you cannot write the history of the game without them, makes it trickier. Because for me,
but again, you're making shit up, so you don't have to use the same criteria I do.
Well, if I can use my own criteria, then Gretzky's not on it. If I have to do the writing history of the game, then I have to put him on there, because it's revolutionized the way that scoring was at that time. It's also popularizing the game in the southern United States. You don't have all those California teams without Gretzky there. That's a reality. The trade in '88 was a big news story in the hockey world. It sent reverberations around. That was a big deal. It increased a lot of the profile of it. And his statistical dominance, in points especially, is one of those things that is a standout from that era. And he finished off his career in '99, so at least it was modern-ish. As a pure goal scorer and a pure offensive force, Lemieux is a better player to me. He's a more exciting player to watch. Gretzky never amused me to watch. He didn't entertain me. But I could acknowledge that he was excellent at what he did. There's no lack of talent. There's no lack of skill. But Lemieux had the skill and he had a little more size. So it's one of those things. He had a multitude of ways of getting you. And then he came back after, Parkinson's. He came back after all these injuries and all these different issues a couple of times. And when he came back the last time, like at age 35, he scores, and he spends the last half season scoring 77 points. He scores over 30 goals in age 35 after 4 years off. Who does that?
It's true.
It's obscene. So again, he scored almost 700 goals in his career. What would he have done if he hadn't taken 3 years off, another year off here, another half year off here, injuries, treatments, all this stuff. Sorry, it was Hodgkin's lymphoma, I think it was. So it was cancer, basically.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, the point is still the same. You get cancer, you come back, and you're still like a elite scoring level. That half season, he scored 1.77 points per game at age 35.
Yeah.
After 4 years off. And he owned the team. That's a boss move. I'm just going to show up and I'm just going to be like the best point getter and scorer for the second half of the season.
Fact.
After 4 years off. What the hell?
Yep.
Screw it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. That's a boss move. Now,
Oh, for sure.
if I'm going, like I said, history of the game, Gretzky's got to be there. So here's what I'll put it. If I remove that caveat, I'm putting Howe, because Howe was an Iron Man. He was Mr. Hockey. He also made a name. He was also great in the WHA, came back for the last season, played hockey in 5 or 6 decades or whatever ridiculous thing it was. He started in the 40s. He started in the 40s and finished his last season in 1980.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
It's off, that's scary.
In a good way, ridiculous in a positive way.
Yeah, so it's very difficult not to
And is that Gordie Howe behind you on the wall? Or is that...
No, it's Modano.
That's Modano on Detroit?
Yeah. For his 1 year, for his ill-fated year in Detroit.
Okay.
I had to have it for variety.
But you do have a Gordie Howe autograph somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but if you look, there's a little orange thing there.
Yep.
That's a bobblehead that's autographed by Gordie Howe.
Nice.
So I do have. But the thing is that when you take it in totality, Gordie Howe is a must, regardless of criteria, whatever. Again, Mr. Hockey. We must include Gordie Howe. Bobby Orr is an excellent choice. I like it from that perspective, having a defenseman in there. I'm going to think about that for a second. I want Lemieux in there because to me, he's, like I said, he was an offensive force. If I remove the story of the game part of it, then I can exclude Gretzky and that'll amuse me. So I will. He can be an honorable mention. He's decent. He's fine. He'll be over there in the corner. So Howe, Lemieux, because he was an offensive force, like a scary offensive force. For goaltenders, George Vezina, because he was the first one that put the position on the map, even before everything else.
I did debate about putting Vezina on. That was my original person who I had on the list as the goalkeeper spot, but then the mask part
for sure
is what took me to Jacques Plante.
Yeah, when it comes to goal, so I'll quickly give you my methodology in goaltenders. It's a completely different era. Like, I can't treat Vesna exactly as I would other goaltenders from later eras because they played a completely different style, completely different era, less games, whatever. But you also played a very different style. Like, there was a lot of differences in the way the game was played overall.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we named the award after the guy. Like, he's acknowledged as a pioneer. So regardless, the story of hockey, if you want to introduce that concept of it back into it a little bit as part of the criteria, the man's name is on the award.
Yep.
When you name one of the awards for best goaltender after this guy, we got to at least acknowledge him a little bit.
For sure.
So I'll put Vesna on there. I'll put Howe on there. I'll put Lemieux on there as an offensive force from that 80s time period in particular. And then the last position gets a bit tricky for me because I already, like I said, I moved Gretzky to the side because I know it'll annoy some people and that amuses me. My trolldom must be appeased. But the other issue that I run into is when I'm thinking of goaltenders, another guy I could have thought of, and I don't like the guy, but I would have thought of, Waugh popularized the butterfly style, which was a big game changer for goaltenders. Like Brodeur and a lot of those guys that came after adopted this style after Waugh popularized it.
Well, it basically took the stand-up goaltender out of the game.
That's kind of a big deal. So that's a significant, shift. That changing. You want to talk about changing the game?
Yeah,
that's a changer in the game
for sure.
So like, I'll put him in the honorable mention category only because I only have 4 slots. Mount Rushmore. The problem with that is I only have 4 slots, but he's right there. Like I could put him right back in over Vesna for that reason. The other guy that the guy I will include in the 4th one will be Orr, and it'll be mainly because he basically popularized the idea of an offensive defenseman. He led the league in scoring as a defenseman. That wasn't a thing that you did, but he did it. And it was in an era that is like, it was unthinkable. So, and for an entire generation of some hockey fans, even to this day, they will claim Bobby Orr as the best. Some will vote for Howe. Some will vote for Orr for the reason I just outlined. He was a defenseman who played defense, but could lead the league in scoring.
Yep.
So like all that put together, Howe was a force. He was a physical force. My knock on Gretzky is that he doesn't have physicality. He doesn't. That's not his game. It's not his style. But Howe had physicality, and he could score, and he could do everything else, and he had longevity because he was a machine. He would just keep going out there, and then he'd punish people.
Yeah.
Gordie Howe hat trick is not, it's not a 3 goals. The Gordie Howe hat trick includes fighting because he would do it if he needed to. And he had no qualms about dropping the gloves, and he goes, I will beat you into submission. This is what we're going to do.
Yep.
And then I'll score a goal, I'll get an assist, and that's the Gordie Howe hat trick. We're done. Anything else I can do for you? So I think I'll go Howe. I'll go, like I said, as an offensive force, I love Lemieux's style. I'll go Bobby Orr because he revolutionized that position entirely. And Vesna was the trailblazer for goaltenders. And the award is named after him.
All right.
So that'll be my 4.
All right. So 2 doubled up and 2 not. And there you have it, people.
There you go. So that's how we'll play that one. Good stuff. So anything else we want to touch on then before we conclude?
No, I don't think so, man. I don't think so. Other than thank you for joining us for cake.
It is very important. So we'll go off the air here with the beloved. Here we go. We're not too far removed. We have to acknowledge Cake at the end. So thank you for Cake for hanging out for the entire podcast.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate it.
Always, always. So we'll be back for episode 101. What will be on episode 101? Hell if I know. Haven't figured it out yet and haven't made it up. Probably won't figure it out either. We'll figure it out sometime on Saturday. Right around the time I hit record.
Sounds good.
And that's kind of the way we roll. So that's basically the way it'll go. So anyway, the podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. In addition to YouTube, where you can see the video version of it, you'll get basically this. And in this case, we tried out streaming live onto Facebook. There is an Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast Facebook group. So if you join that, then you would get the little notification and you'd be able to watch it live if you happen to be on when it's live on a Saturday. So that are the locations there. So now we're going forward onto the next episode, Cake, or whatever the next one ends up being called. And then as we go along, we'll keep modifying it. Now that we're starting to move a little bit forward into that, one thing I'll say here at the end is if you do catch it in any of those formats, leave a comment if you can somewhere, because we'd love to get the feedback and see if there's anything you'd be interested in. It's always going to be a little bit of a random mishmash of different things. I'll bring up a $12 million NFT. I will explain the new use of the Grey Cup. Now we know what we can use it for.
I will keep the Super League salt alive.
Correct. And I will denounce the existence of the CFL because it was never a thing. And that's how we roll around here. That is just how it's going to be. So anyway, that's it for episode 100 of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast. Thank of those of you who have checked it out. We will catch you in the next one.